Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is all about the 10th anniversary of my Fiat 126P. Clearly it's not just 10 years old, it's way older. It's been built in 1991, so in the next few weeks it will have 29 years. And for this particular video I have been looking for a suitable location. Unfortunately it is December and pretty cold outside, so I didn't manage to do it. And I didn't want to go back to my standard shooting location because I've been there many times, and I guess in the last video as well. So therefore I would like to invite you into my nerdy living room, and hoping that the background isn't too distracting. Before starting with the video, I would like to mention that certain parts of it will definitely be a repetition of older videos, but I've never had the opportunity to tell the whole story of my Fiat 126P from the beginning until the present in one particular video. A short disclaimer before starting with the video. At some point in this video my cat might decide to join in. Currently he is just looking around the room, so be prepared for that. And without further ado, let's get started. So it was December 10th, 2010 when the car finally arrived. It was a very snowy day, as you can see in the picture. The funny thing about the whole delivery was that the car was delivered by truck, and the truck had two trailers. And on the first trailer there were two trucks, and on the second trailer there was only my little car sitting there pretty comfortable. And that immediately put a smile on my face, because how could it not? So the first task was to bring the car home back into the garage. However, I've never driven a car like this, especially not in winter conditions, so I asked my father to do that. And luckily this was just a 10-minute drive. So this was a pretty stressful day, however, in a positive way. Now, the next chapter will be the first steps of the car when imported into Austria. Now that the car had arrived in Austria, the first thing I had to do was to have it registered. This is a process that every imported car has to go through, and it is basically a thorough checkup. For example, if everything is up with Austrian laws. If everything checks out, the new owner of the car has to go to the Department of Finance to pay the consumption tax. The amount of the consumption tax depends on the price that was agreed upon in the contract. In my case, that was around 70 euros, if I remember correctly. So I made an appointment for my checkup, and not even 100 meters before the testing facilities, my car broke down. That was very unfortunate, because I had to reschedule my entire appointment. The problem was with a faulty fuel pump, which meant that the car didn't start, so they couldn't measure any emissions or perform any other checks. So that was not my best day. I was very disappointed. So fast forward a couple of weeks, I ordered a new fuel pump, installed it into the car, made a second appointment, and this time around everything worked out. So I was very glad about that, and I was finally able to drive my car officially in Austria. The next chapter is going to be the first hiccups with my Fiat 126P. So the relationship with the car didn't go very well for the first few months, and I remember a specific moment when I was driving around and had to stop at some traffic lights, and the car died on me and wouldn't restart. Luckily this was pretty close to home, so I was able to push the car, and it seemed in the first few months at least that I was pushing the car more than actually driving it. A short time after that the alternator malfunctioned and didn't load the battery. Fortunately for me, I knew a friend, or I had a friend who knew about these cars and their electrics, so he was able to help me out. And that brings us to the first technical inspection of the car. It was December 2011, and a few weeks prior to that, I had the car at a workshop to have a few details sorted out. And unfortunately, it turned out that the mechanic didn't do a very good job because the car failed the inspection. Mainly because of the brakes. One brake was working like 100% and the second one didn't work at all. So I had to make an appointment with a different workshop to have the brakes repaired, make another appointment for the checkup. But in the end, that worked out pretty well, and the car has passed its checkup on the second try. I have mentioned this in a recent video called Story Time, and you can watch it by clicking on the banner up here. So shortly after this first technical inspection, I've been having some serious thoughts about changing things on the car. However, as I am a no talent when it comes to craftsmanship, I was only able to do minor things. And I have never been a fan of the plastic front and rear bumpers and the plastic covers on the doors. So that was my start. Swapping the front and rear bumpers for the chrome ones was very easy and quickly done. Removing the side covers from the doors, however, was a completely different task. And hopefully you can see that there are a few mounting points on the side covers, and removing them left me with a lot of holes in the car's body. So those I had welded shut and painted over in red by a professional paint shop. And basically in the same process I had my rims reconditioned and painted black. So after these few steps, the car looked pretty good in my opinion, and I would like to show you a short video clip of that. I have to admit, at this point in time, I was very satisfied with how the car looked. However, this was just the beginning of major changes in the car's future. And this leads us to our next chapter, the beginning of the restoration of my car. So a few years have passed and I have finally decided to have the car restored. Unfortunately, at this time, I wasn't able to pay for this whole enterprise myself, so I decided to draft a business plan with everything that it entails, what I wanted to achieve with the car, certain estimates on how much it may cost, and sent it to a local energy drink producer who I thought would be a great sponsor. And a few weeks later I received an answer, and although it may not have been the answer I was hoping for, I decided to start with the restoration anyway. This was around February 2016. I met with a mechanic who specializes in restoring old cars. We went through all the entire process, and I remember vividly that I told the mechanic that I wanted the car back in June or July 2016 to enjoy the car in the summer. This turned out to be way too optimistic on my part because the car wouldn't be ready until summer 2017. Before giving the car off to the restoration, I removed all the interior to save some time and money, The only things left in the car were the driver's seat, the steering wheel and the pedals. The whole restoration process started with stripping the car from its original red paint, and this was achieved by sandblasting the car. And now I would like to show you a short video clip on how the car looked like after being sandblasted. I was very lucky that the body of the car didn't have any corrosion that had to be fixed. And therefore, the next step was to decide what color the car is going to have. So I decided to go with the electric orange from the Ford Focus from a few years back. So a few weeks after that, I decided to visit the workshop to see how the result looked. And needless to say, I was very impressed and basically speechless, because the paint looked absolutely fantastic and the color changed depending on the angle of the light. And again, I would like to show you a short clip how the finished product looked. This was around September 2016 and I was hoping to have the car back soon. I was wrong. Obviously the car had to be put together again, but the owner of the workshop probably had a lot to do, or better paying customers, because as mentioned before, it wouldn't be earlier than summer 2017 when the car was finally finished. So I was patiently waiting for the call to come, and when it finally came, I couldn't believe it because it's been such a long time. So I immediately jumped into the bus, drove to the workshop and picked the car up. And what I failed to mention earlier in the video is that the restoration didn't only take place on the visual side, but on the technical side as well. So all the parts that weren't good enough have been swapped for new ones, or at least reconditioned ones. The advantage here with a Fiat 126P is that it has a lot of similarities with the Fiat Cinquecento, and therefore there are plenty of parts still available, because the Cinquecento is still a highly sought after car. So I was having a pretty good summer. I had my newly restored car and enjoyed every moment of it. And shortly after, the next annual technical checkup was up, and luckily the car passed flawlessly. And honestly, everything else would have been a major disappointment. I would like to continue in the next chapter with the restoration of the original engine. So the next big thing happened in the summer of 2018. I have decided to have the original engine reconditioned because it had a little over 80,000 kilometers, so it was time. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to wait for the entire reconditioning process to take place, so I managed to buy an entire new engine off the internet. And it was this beast. It has 600 cubic centimeters, which is a little bit less than the original engine, which had 650. And although the difference seems to be very similar, I did notice it while driving the car, because it wouldn't accelerate as I was used to. However, it served me very well for the next 2 years, and I was enjoying it very much. Nothing much else happened during 2018. I obviously had my annual checkup in December, and the car passed it flawlessly. So this next chapter is some minor problems with the car in 2019. In 2019 there were a few minor problems with the car, but nothing major. I remember being at a car wash, and while wiping down the car I noticed that the fan belt wasn't in its best shape anymore and needed replacing. And that is where I made a fatal mistake and decided to replace it myself. I was watching a lot of videos, reading in the car's manual on how to do it, and it seemed easy, and I did indeed manage to replace it, but I didn't do it properly. And unfortunately, I don't have a spare fan belt anymore, but we have the engine here, and the fan belt is supposed to be here in the middle or over those two parts. And replacing it is pretty easy. One just has to loosen up those 3 screws and put down the pulley. Or you don't even have to put it down, you just have to loosen it up a little bit, and then you're putting the fan belt over. And then in reverse, obviously, and then it is pretty tight already. And if you have a torque screwdriver, a torque wrench, sorry for that, you can apply the correct pressure to it. However, I didn't have one, I still don't have one, and therefore I put too much pressure on the belt and it ripped apart just only a few kilometers. So I wanted to have a close-up of the engine on how to properly mount the fan belt. Unfortunately, with the other footage, it was possible to zoom in, but the quality would be very bad, or was really bad, so I decided to record a separate short video about that. So first of all, what happens when you put on the fan belt incorrectly or improperly is that you get a ripped off screw, among other things. However, I have here a spare part that goes right up here. Then in the next step, the back pulley can be put into place like this. In this moment, you can already put in the fan belt, and to fix it slightly, you can put on the second part of the pulley right here. Then the 3 screws are being put in place. Ideally, you have a torque wrench for that, because every bolt, every screw, every nut has a certain torque that needs to be applied. I didn't do that, which is why I had to live with the consequences. And then the fan belt is in place, and if it's mounted correctly, in order to check it, you can apply pressure to the middle of the fan belt, and if it bends 10 to 15 millimeters, this means that it's been properly mounted. Obviously, in my case, I had too much pressure on the belt, and therefore it ripped off a screw and destroyed the front part of the pulley. And I learned from that mistake, because should it ever happen to me again, I will definitely have a torque screw available, or better yet, I will immediately go to a workshop that I trust. So hopefully you enjoyed this little extra footage, and let's continue with the video. So I had to make an appointment at a workshop to have it repaired properly this time, and they did it in a matter of hours, and I was gone again. A few months later, I was driving around with the car, and suddenly I heard a very familiar noise coming from the engine, and guess what happened? Exactly the same again. The fan belt ripped apart, destroyed a screw, or ripped off a screw and destroyed the pulley. So this wasn't a very good day. So I had to make an appointment with yet another workshop, and there they did good work. They replaced the fan belt, and I haven't had problems ever since. Around the same time, I was starting to experience some problems with the starter. Clearly the car wouldn't start, but what was even more frustrating is when it actually did, and I was away with the car, and then it wouldn't restart. As I was pleased with the work the workshop did with the fan belt, I decided to have the starter replaced there, and they did an okay job, because the car would start again, but not on a regular basis, and this is where I made the decision that the car is going back to Poland. So in August 2020, or August of this year, I decided to have the car transported back to Poland to have it thoroughly checked in every detail. Three major things were done to the car. First of all, I decided to have the original engine put back into the car. I managed to buy a lot of new parts, but had to use a few reconditioned ones as well. Furthermore, the gearbox has been thoroughly checked because I've been experiencing some problems with the clutch. And the complete electric system of the car has been checked as well in order to avoid any possible problems in the future. Apart from those three things, a few minor details have been sorted out as well. And the car was finally ready to be picked up in late October. And I was planning to go to Poland myself and drive back with the car. However, due to the current health situation in Europe and worldwide and the travel restrictions, this was impossible. So I organized the transport to have the car transported back to Austria. I have made a separate video about what's been happening that you can check up right about my head here or here. So the car was about to arrive in Austria and I was pretty excited about that. However, this excitement almost immediately turned into anger. So the moment after I have taken the car off the ramp, I noticed a huge scratch in the hood of the car that went all through the different paint layers. Unfortunately, this was not the only damage the car sustained while being on repairs in Poland. Another huge problem or damage is that the engine cover has been painted with a pretty cheap paint in a yellow-orange color scheme. And I can only explain that to myself that the mechanic wasn't very careful while removing the engine and putting the original engine back into the car. And the last thing was that the engine cabin was really filthy. So needless to say, I was very disappointed with this result, and I made a reaction video to that you can see by clicking on the banner again. And whatever money I saved while repairing the car in Poland, I will have to invest here in Austria to have everything sorted out again. In the last few days, I contacted the workshop that did the restoration on my car to explain the situation. And the estimate for the hood alone, for repainting the hood, is 700 euros. And having the engine cover repainted will be a lot more expensive because the engine would have to be taken out of the car, stripped, sandblasted and repainted from scratch. Luckily, this isn't as noticeable as the scratch on the hood, so I can easily postpone that into the future. However, I am still very disappointed that the car sustained more damage than repairs, but that's the current situation. I will have to deal with it, but this leads us to the last chapter of the car, or of this video, sorry, which is the technical inspection. Just a few weeks ago, I had the technical inspection of the orange car, and I am happy to report that it passed it flawlessly without any problems, major problems. Obviously, there are some minor problems, but nothing serious, and I will be taking care of those minor problems so they won't become major problems in the next year. This basically sums up everything that has happened over the last 10 years with this car, and this leaves me with two questions. Would I have imagined those 10 years to be this colorful? Never. Would I make the same decisions again? Most definitely. Although not every decision was the right one to make, I wouldn't change the experience for anything in the world. So before closing off this video, there are certainly things to come up in the future, but I don't want to tell anything at this moment. And once again, I would like to ask you to hit that like button, Leave your comments down below, share this video with your friends, family, and everyone who loves old-timers and classic cars, vintage cars, and I'll be seeing you as fast as possible. Bye bye. Oh, and before I forget, this was the last video for this year, so I would like to wish you all happy holidays and a happy new year whenever you decide to celebrate it. Bye bye.